March 43, I got a call and I went to navigation school. I graduated at December 31st, 1943. I was assigned to a B-17 squadron, and we were training in Florida. And I walked up to what was supposed to be a safe house, and I just touched the doorknob, and in an instant, I've got 6 men all over me. I got 3 Gestapo and 3 SS Schutzstaffel. One of them clubs me over the head. Another one pulls me down to the floor. Another one handcuffs on me, a gag in my mouth, and I'm lying on the floor then. And of course, in a few minutes, my co-pilot got the same treatment. And we were hustled then into cars, 2 armed men and a driver in each car. We come to this huge building, not very high, but concrete. And that was the old federal prison of the Netherlands nation. And we're hustled into this room, and now you begin to wait. We were standing there separate, and I was trying to be a little brave. I was trying to stand at attention. It wasn't very long. I had relapsed to pray rest, and eventually I'm doing about the best I can just to stand up. In another hour, maybe, they pushed me into a separate room. And there was a desk, a chair, and another small chair. On the wall was a big picture of Hitler. And I was standing there for another 15, 20 minutes. And it's getting on your nerves. Finally, the man walks in there, an officer. I mean, you could cut butter with the seam in his heat. His shoes were shiny like a mirror. And he walks up to me and he says, "Is that the new uniform of the United States Army Air Corps?" Very sarcastic. And this went on. He was extremely sarcastic. He wanted to know what information we had. Well, we didn't have any military information. And eventually, we stopped, and this has been we're by ourselves. Then we're ushered into cells. The cell was about 12 feet long, 6 feet wide, 7 feet wide, with a little a ledge at the back, a little table that hinged down from the wall with a 60-watt light bulb above it, a heavy oak door, and in the oak door there was a peephole, you could tell, with a metal slide on the outside they could lift and look in. And there was also a door about 8 inches square, which hinged down inside the door to make a shelf. And later on they could put food in there. That first night we're there, we still don't know really what's going on. But it's getting dark, and eventually we hear someone whistling Bob Hope's theme song, "Thanks for the Memory." And then there's voices all over. That's the signal that the German sentry had gone from the hall for the night. And you could talk cell to cell. We found out this was the federal prison, Scheveningen, and every other prisoner was Dutch families, men, women, children, on our way to be executed. And they could talk then. I'm still in civilian clothes. I don't know what color trousers I had. I had a pink tone-on-tone shirt, sort of thing. And there were patterns of threads, red. And I'll never forget, I wore it for 30 days. And at that time, it had been open about a year, and I was prisoner number 2055. I know because that's the dog tag they gave me. And this camp was getting bigger. Every month there'd be another bomb group come in from the United States. The Red Cross and the YMCA kept us alive. The Red Cross kept us, they tried to give us a pound box of food for each man once every 8 or 9 days. We were allowed to start a library. We had just 2 sections when I got in there in the camp, and as more Americans are coming over, fine. Eventually we had 5 sections and called them lamps, but it's all one camp. I was in the center camp, and we had a library, and you get this, you got 1,500 men there. They have 16 hours a day, and they would come in and say, "Hey, Lieutenant, if you get a book with a little section in it, dog ear the page so I don't have to read the whole book." Eventually, we had men that had been professional school teachers, so we started school, actually classes. And I have a certificate that verifies that I passed college algebra 1 year with the same text they used. I got it signed by the general that I passed. So it sounds wonderful, and in some ways it was. Now, we know what's going on better than you did in the United States. We had the German radio, we had the German newspapers, which are very accurate. And eventually there's a 3rd camp there, third part of the camp, and we had been English, British, and Americans together. Then we were separated, so we had a separate compound for Americans and a separate compound for British. In the British, they were building an escape tunnel, the Great Tunnel. It was about 18 or 19 feet underground, and it was 25 inches square. I know how big it was because to shore it, you've got to shore it up with sand. We had a volunteer, 1 bedboard from each bed, and the bedboards were 25 inches wide, so that's the depth of the tunnel. They had to dig naked, because you know what, and eventually it was 300 feet long, and there had to be 2 intermediate stops in there, because you haven't a rope long enough to get rid of the sand, or to get you up to the digging surface. And eventually it's March 1943, and the tunnel has to go. And we actually had men, tailors, who converted Army and British uniforms into civilian clothing. They scraped it off, made buttons, and now these men, the instigator was a South African. He said he wanted to get 200 men out in one night, and I said, "Oh, no, that's ridiculous." Anyway, you had to get the sand from the tunnel face to an intermediate place, then another short rope, and finally, down back here, we got people who were making pumps like this, and were actually pumping air through a pipe made from discarded cans of Clem milk. Was the biggest can we got, and actually pipeline under this tunnel for air. And for a while, I tried to light it with a lamp burning on margarine, but that fouled the air. Eventually, there was some construction. They actually stole a hank of wire and tapped into the 110 volts electric system of the Germans. I mean, it was unbelievable. The tunnel is open, and we've got men from other barracks all hiding here. None of this can be seen by the Germans. And the first man comes up the tunnel, and he was supposed to come up the surface across a little lane into the woods. It was 25 feet short. So what are you going to do? Well, they've got a lot of fake papers and everything. Everything has to go that night. So they devised a system that the first man up takes a rope across this little lane, and when it's safe for the next man to come up, he tugs the rope. And he finally got 7. The first man out was a Dutch pilot, had lived in Holland. The second and third men were Norwegians. They were the only ones that had a chance to escape. They could speak the language and everything. But they got across. And they had a signal with this rope when the Germans were not facing there. And eventually they got 71 men out. And then the alarm went off and everything had to stop. And they got to get men out of the tunnel back to the barracks. And the first man, as I say, a Dutch pilot, the second and third Norwegians, they were the only ones. And they were the only ones really who had any expectation that they would get off. But Bedlam come in, and you've all read the accounts that the SS and the Gestapo captured all of them, and they executed 50. They just took them out and shot them. For a while then, things got a little strict, but it's now 1943, 44, and the Russians now have gotten out of Stalingrad, and they're at the west end of Poland. By this time now, there are 10,000 of us. There are also 8,000 French prisoners. There are also a lot of German families who would like to get out. So there's no way they can lock us out. By golly, on January 25th, they did, and they came up to, I forgot to mention, the senior American officers were Colonel Spivey, and he was the finest man I ever. They came to him and they said, we have a car for you and your staff here. And Spivey says, well, how many cars do you have? Oh, just one for you. He says, if my men walk, I walk. And he did. He not only walked. We started walking. It was about 10 degrees, about 7, 8, 9 inches of snow on the ground. And they allowed us to break into the Red Cross stuff so we'd get a fuse food. And we started walking at 2 o'clock in the morning. We walked all night, and we were the third group. And next day afternoon, they finally found us a Lutheran church. They allowed us to sleep in there. We had 1,000 men sleeping on the floor, and some of the people had to sleep outside. The next day we walked another 15 miles, and we slept outside on the ground. And the third day we walked, and we came to a factory which made this red pipe downspout. You know, the kilns were still working, so there was heat in this building. We were allowed to get in there. We could actually shave, make hot tea, and we stayed there 2 days. Next, we walked another 12, 13 miles, and then we walked 5 miles to a railroad station. And they put us on World War I boxcars, French boxcars, 40 and 8, 40 men and 8 horses. And I was more comfortable walking. I was a better walker. And there was no room to sit down. Finally, we rigged up some hammocks with our blankets, so we got enough men off the floor, and we were in those cars for 3 days to get to a bigger prison camp. But now, we know exactly what's going on. We have the German newspaper, the German radio, and we know that the Allies are going to... Patton is now just west of us, and he's going to liberate us. On April 25th, I think it was, there's cannon fire, and American tanks burst through the fence, and Patton comes in, and we had thousands of men just there, and people had been there, some of them 4 years, English, and Patton comes in, he says, I know you think I'm going to get you out, but I have Germans to kill. I say that was April 25th, and eventually they said they're going to fly you out. And they put us on GI trucks and flew us to a little air base near there, and a fleet of C-47s. It had been a DC-3 the finest old airplane in the world, and they flew us from there to Le Havre, and from Le Havre we were going to ship and come back. And we stayed there. We got a bath. We got clean clothes. We got money, and we got on a ship. In my case, we got on a ship, and it was heaven because it was clean. We were on that ship for about 6 days, I guess. And I got back to New York on May the 8th. And the next day, I got on a train, came to Atterbury in Indiana. Oh, Lord, let us always remember, every day I awaken is a beautiful day. There's always someone worse off than I am who needs my help. There's no such thing as bad food. And prayer will accomplish miracles.